Hello, Internet. I'm Evan Dashevsky, features editor with PCMag.com. Welcome to the Convo. Okay, so today we're going to talk about life's little distractions. We all like music, TV, sports, but we don't only like to consume them. We also like to get together as fans and discuss our shared fandom. Now, we trade bits of trivia with friends, make lists with our favorite bands, debate with strangers on the internet about which players are best. Now, so why do we fill up our free time with activities that, in the grand scheme of things, are inherently meaningless? Well, probably because they help us ignore the horrible fact that we're all gonna die one day. However, a very interesting thing can happen when in indulging these meaningless discussions. We inevitably end up running into things that actually do have meaning, things like values, ethics, and what it means to be human. My guest today is one of the best at finding the meaning in entertainment. He is a journalist known for covering sports and pop culture, but that's just the subject matter. There's always a whole lot more in there. His work has appeared in Spin, Esquire, ESPN.com, and the New York Times Magazine, just to name a few. He was a consulting editor of Grantland, RIP, and is the author of numerous best-selling books, at least 10, both fiction and nonfiction. His latest work, Chuck Klosterman X, a highly specific, defiantly incomplete history of the early 21st century, is a collection of previously published essays, and it is out today, we think. Okay, Chuck Klosterman, welcome to the Convo.
It's great to be here.
Okay, now for those of you at home, the show is called The Convo, not The Dialogue, so if you have any questions, ask them in comments, and Social Pete will read them throughout the show.
Well,
now,
but wouldn't them talking be dialogue? Like if they're talking, that's dialogue.
Right. No, but they have to take, in order to take part, they have to comment, and then Social Pete joins it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, joins the Convo. It's called The Convo, not The Dialogue.
Yes, I know, but I was just saying that
people.
it would seem like, dialogue, well, if there's,
Yeah.
dialogue could be more than that.
I think of as going into the dramatic.
This is a very interesting semantic discussion. I'm sure people love it.
It's all going to take off from here.
Also, I think it's interesting. It's like you talk right off like the iPad because this is a computer show, I guess. That's why.
We can go with that. No, the real reason is that we don't have a teleprompter, but
I know, but because of
it's okay. The audience is okay with it.
Like we should have a desktop up here.
Yeah, and a lot of people, are watching this or listening to it on the podcast and things like that. So it's all.
Are they listening to it as live on a podcast?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not that sophisticated yet.
I guess that would be radio.
Yeah,
that would be radio.
Yeah. Podcast is radio. Yeah, on-demand radio.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's jump into it. Did I get out that you can leave comments and then Social People read them throughout the day? Because please do that. Okay, so your new book, first of all, let's go over the title because we were talking about it earlier. It is Chuck Klosterman X. I had no idea.
No, it's 10.
10, it is 10.
Yeah, that's just what we talked about.
I misunderstood. Okay. I thought, no, the thing I didn't understand was...
Totally understandable to think it's X because when you see the X...
And because it's black and silver,
we don't
just
often
like Malcolm
use
X's.
Roman numerals, you know, with digital clocks, very few Roman numerals. That'd be a good idea, actually, though, is a digital clock with Roman numerals. Someone should come up with this. So it's the 10th book.
Yes.
So I called it 10 because the last time I put together, this is an anthology, a compilation of work. The last time I did that, it was Chuck Klosterman 4. So the cover said with the I and the V, but then people called it Chuck Klosterman IV like it was a medical text. I guess I should have I should just use numbers in the future, but well, see, I thought it was like a stand-in because it's an anthology, so it's like all the different ideas you had, so I thought it was like the X has many meanings.
Yes,
it could be in math, the unknown thing, and then the X is like, if I was Alex Haley, it would have a different meaning again. But I just, that's what, and this is the subtitle for promoting books, so I should do that.
Go for it.
I think And then the thing is also, the pages are black.
Yes, this is like the Black Album of books.
Yeah. This is, and somebody asked me why no one's ever done that before.
Yeah.
Somebody must have, right? Aren't Bibles like this sometimes?
Bibles have they have the golden, that's what I've seen, the golden side pages, but I think this might be the first all-black book.
I would really question that, but it's the first one I've ever written.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's, so this is a collection of essays, previously published essays from, the new millennium. Was there an important reason to kind of capture that moment, or is it just your time?
That's a really good question, because no one really does this anymore.
Yeah.
Like the idea of having anthologies come out, that was a very popular thing in the 80s and 70s and 60s. Of course, many of these pieces are on the internet. Somebody actually asked me, they were like, well, why should I buy this book? It's like, couldn't I just go to Google Books and look at the chapters and see what you've picked and then do Google searches for your name and all the individuals and all the artists. And then for the 50 pages that are new, I could just go to the library or go back to Google Books and read those pages. And you know what? If you want to do that, fine. If that is worth $25 to you, go ahead. I prefer, though, them just to be together. What had happened is the very first time I'd done an anthology, like in 2006, I wasn't really that known. I mean, I'd written some books, and Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs had come out, and that was kind of a popular book. But there was many people who had no idea I'd been a journalist. So then the thinking was, let's put the journalism here, okay? But now another 10 years have passed, and I feel like the work has been better, and that I've done in the past. So it was like, in the interim. So I thought, well, let's do another one. And also, I mean, I guess it is a little weird that I've put out 2 essentially greatest hits collections. There's some, like David Grand has put out 1, I put out 2 somehow. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But you know what? If people don't want to buy it, they don't have to. I'm happy it exists. If somebody wants to put your work into a compilation, I'm very flattered by it, so I was like, let's do it.
Whenever Red Hot Chili Peppers put out their greatest hits before Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, and then their biggest hits came afterwards.
Yeah, well, I am very much like the Red Hot Chili Peppers
of journalism.
Writing,
sure, of course,
I slap the bass a lot. I have a heroin addiction. I sing about California.
Wear socks on where they shouldn't be worn.
Exactly.
So a lot of things have changed 15 years because of technology. Now let's talk about how listening to music has changed. Now we all have the power now to listen to all the songs ever made. That's pretty amazing. I don't know, how has it affected you as a music fan?
Well, I mean, on a broad sense, it's kind of moved us back to the model of the 50s and early 60s as a pre-album era.
Okay.
Now I feel like people don't consume music
as albums,
as groups. They it's as individual songs. Yeah. The real high point of this, of like having access to everything, was, probably actually 2003 or 4 before they cracked down on some of those, like, the
Napsters.
Well, but post Napster, there was the guy from New Zealand,
Mega.com.
Mega Upload.
Yeah.
That was during the period where you could literally find any song, unreleased material, anything that had happened, instantly. Yeah. Now it's a little more difficult. You have to, of course, be on Spotify, and that has some limitations. But how has it changed my experience? Well, I think it changes when you think about it, it's like things are always going to change this way, right? And are they really better or worse? I don't know if they are, but it feels different. Yeah. So it feels worse. Like in the 80s, there was a period of my life when I was, like, say, an 8th grader. I had 5 cassettes, and that's all I could afford. And I was sort of in an isolated area. So I would play these 5 cassettes over and over and over again. I would read the liner notes, and I would almost inject meaning into them that didn't exist, and I would have this super deep relationship with these records. Now, to a young person who's in 8th grade now, that must seem insane. Yeah. Because they have thousands and thousands of songs, which they probably listen to once or twice, or if they love a song, 8 times and move on. Yeah. Now, I prefer the old way. Okay. But only because that was the way I experienced it. Yeah. I can't make an argument that somehow it is better to have limitations or obstructions. But if you have those limitations and obstructions on your experience, that galvanizes the way you think about the world. So, to me, I liked those limitations because it forced me to have a relationship with music that went outside of the listening experience. Right. I had to think about Ozzy Osbourne's Bark of the Moon when I wasn't playing. Right. And I don't know if that would still happen today.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, I'm kind of jealous of the kids of today because I was hungry and desperate for to learn, get all this kind of music, but I could only afford so much because new CDs at Sam Goody were like $20.
But remove that hunger though. That hunger, they don't have that now. Yeah. So they have a different. What they probably hunger for is the kind of personal relationship that you had with records that you created. Right. Like, I don't know what did you like when you were in high school?
I was a 9 Inch Nails guy.
You were 9 Inch Nails. Okay, like the first record or like
Downward Spiral.
Okay, Downward Spiral. So how old? You must be in your 30s.
I am 37.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I look younger?
Well, I had no idea. I had no idea how old people are now. So you love Trent Reznor. Yeah. You probably also, because you like Trent Reznor, you probably bought like filter as
Yes.
well. You bought the records that
Yep.
were associated tangentially
Most
with
were
Trent
horrible,
Reznor.
but yes.
You maybe went and got back and got Cure records just
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I think you. So in the past, because we had these limitations where you had to pay probably an inordinate amount of money for this thing.
Yeah.
You were also buying into the culture.
Yeah.
You know, you would maybe go to Hot Topic and buy a shirt because you're like, I want to sort of feel what it's like to be part of these people who I see when I go to a Nine Inch Nails concert.
Right.
That probably is gone, okay? I don't know if music still has that sort of cultural identifying power. It's not a signifier the way it used to be. I think now the internet and social media has sort of taken that role. But does it change the music? I mean, I suppose not.
Yeah.
I mean, but the thing about rock music and pop music and country music and hip hop is that its importance goes outside of the sonic experience. So when that changed, what we're really talking about is that shift. We're not so much talking, I mean, like a Chance the Rapper record is great, okay? What is different about him, though, in compared to someone like, you know, Public Enemy, is not really that it's a dramatic change aesthetically. It has to do with the way that music, what it means to a group of people at the same time. Yeah.
Gotcha. Facebook, you have a question.
What were the 5 cassettes that you owned?
Yeah.
Well, I had Motley Crue, Shout Out the Devil, Van Halen's 1984, Def Leppard's Pyromania, Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne, and ZZ Top's Eliminator. Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be really funny if I'd been like, I can't remember. Yeah.
And then just we'll also talk about TV. Now, you also write a lot about TV. There is a lot of stuff out there, and not only is there a lot of stuff out there, there's a lot of good stuff. I can't keep up, but as someone whose your job is to keep up with this, how do you make choices on what you're gonna delve your attention into?
Well, that is, I mean, I think from a cultural consumption standpoint,
Yeah.
the biggest difference between now and, you know, the relative recent past, you know, the 1980s and the 90s, was that there was a time when television was what you did when there was nothing else to do. Like the idea of appointment television, no one would have ever said that.
Yeah.
If you missed WKRP in Cincinnati, you wasn't like, oh my God, you know, it's like you just like, well, maybe I'll see it in the summer, or maybe I'll never see it. It doesn't really matter. All the episodes were bottle episodes. There was very little serialization outside of like Dallas and Dynasty and stuff. Well, now that has all shifted. I mean, you know, from starting with The Sopranos, it is different now. Now TV is seen as a much more meaningful medium even than film. So how do you decide? Well, I would say this, one thing that has, that you're, in a lot of ways, the decision you make matters less because the quality is all kind of elevated. I mean, right now I'm really, like I watch Better Call Saul, I really like Fargo, there's like only a handful of shows I'm watching. But like, I'm not watching Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. My wife is, but I'm just not watching it. Now, I'm sure if I had chosen that, to watch that, it would be equally incredible. So I think in some ways, if you're just a person who wants to watch television, the network doesn't even matter anymore. I mean, there used to be a time when it was like, you could almost get a sense of how good something was going to be, you know, by who was creating it. Like, but then there was that show Unreal, that was like the fake example of like The Bachelor or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it was on like Lifetime or something. It was like, all of a sudden it was like, well, I guess it could, you know, there could be a good show on the Weather Channel now. I'm not kidding. Like, if somebody said, like, there's a real great show, or Mr. Robot was another example.
Great show.
Of a show that was on a network that
you wouldn't usually watch.
Initially, I did not want to watch the show at all under the assumption that it couldn't be that good, but the way they make TV now has completely flattened. That if you find a smart person, every network has the ability to do a sophisticated show. And, I mean, certainly from a, you know, we were talking about this like musical thing. Was it better now or better then?
Yeah.
There's no question that TV is better now. Like there's nobody out there who was like, boy, I miss the television of the early '80s.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when there was Hill Street Blues and like Miami Vice and everything else just sort of ate up time. You know?
So as, Facebook, I'm sorry, you have a question.
So you used to be the ethicist for the New York Times. What sorts of AI-related questions do you think the person who holds that title will be answering in 30 years?
That's a very interesting question. What kind of artificial intelligence questions will the ethicist be dealing with? Well, I don't know if this will be in 30 years, but obviously, if there is ever a moment when AI is truly self-aware and you know, we can say create a simulation, you know, like The Sims or like Civilization or any of these things, where the characters within the game believe they are real. That is sort of the fundamental question about reality. It's like if you believe that you're alive, you are alive.
Yes.
You know?
And
so
is it okay to kill them?
Exactly. I mean, you know, it's like virtually any idea involving AI in a film, we always just kind of find as interesting sci-fi, but they're all about slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, if a mechanism has agency over how it thinks and feels, there is the jump between us and them is only sort of the imaginations of what we're made of. It's like instead of, you know, carbon bases. I mean, so I mean, any kind of anything with with droids, like Star Wars is about slavery in a lot of ways. Like C-3PO is a slave.
Yeah.
You know, but we don't
A
think
joyful
of that.
slave.
Well, a joyful slave, but
Yeah.
you know, there probably were slaves who was like, they had, you know, if you were raised into slavery, how would you know that there's any kind of life outside of this until you learn about the world? A droid, you would guess, has the understanding of everything, or the internet at least. I don't know, I guess that would be my answer. Yeah.
Well, it's just, now the book is not so much about technology, but there was one quote about technology which I want to ask you about. So in the essay, The City That Time Remembered, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you write the following: I see no value in the future, and I suspect every technological advance since the advent of the gramophone has been, on balance, detrimental to the human race. Our slow erosion of authentic consciousness will never stop, and there is nothing we can do about it. Now, I tend to disagree with this, but we want to give that a bit more context.
Well, no, I believe that. I feel that all technology in the short term is positive, and in the long term probably is, to some degree, negative. Outside of air conditioning,
right?
But no, but like even the gramophone I use as this example. Okay. Well, prior to the gramophone, if you were listening to music, you had to be there. You had to experience it. So there was no way that you could separate yourself. That this is a human creation, and that this is not just a collection of sound waves or a sonic experience. This is a manifestation of someone's creativity and ability and virtuosity and all of these things. Well, as soon as you allow people to experience music without the musician in front of you, which I'm glad is, for me, I mean, I'm glad this is the case because, you know, it'd be real limiting otherwise, but that changes the way you experience it. The idea of like the medium is the message, that's true for everything, you know? So I do think that probably our appreciation of something like music has been eroded by the ability to play it in distant locations. I mean, there's no question that, at least to me, that file sharing and all these things we talked about, like Napster, while for anybody who experienced, if you were in college when Napster came out, and I'm sure you're like, that was the greatest thing, but there's no question that that devalued music.
Yes. I mean, no, it made it harder
because
for,
once it makes a person believes that something should be free, they never go back.
True.
There's never a movement toward things should be free, back to things should cost money. I mean, it completely changed the music industry. Now, did it change music? I guess if you're really a musician and that what you love to do is this creative thing that comes out of you. You don't care how you're being paid or if you're being paid or any of this. But in terms of the culture at large, it's totally different.
Bearded music fan to bearded music fan. Does vinyl, is it really that much better?
Well, here again, it's different. In a way, and the difference is clearer now than it was even during the CD period, because so much of the music we can listen to now comes through that, you know, a computer system. So it's all kind of one channel, the loudness wars of the 90s and the compression changed all that. So if you put on, Houses of the Holy on vinyl, it will seem like the music is more separated, okay? And also, it's, because you have to kind of sit there and turn it over, it's like maybe you listen more closely in a way. There is a warmer sound, but warmer is subjective. I think that this debate will probably not exist in 25 years. I can't imagine in 25 years that there are still people arguing over the warmth of music, because that is something that you had to have had first to sort of miss, you know?
Facebook, you have a question.
Are you happy with the way tech is used in sports?
No, actually, I am not. In fact, I am one of the last people who is against instant replay in sports.
Why?
Well, I'll tell you why.
Okay, yeah.
I'll tell you why. Okay. A football game, a baseball game, all of these things, they're games played by humans. Right? Humans are doing everything, including officiating.
Yeah.
And yet we've made this decision that humans can play the game, but they're not good enough to control the game. There are errors when you watch a sporting event. Players make mistakes. It's not unreasonable to think that a referee will occasionally make a mistake and that will be part of the game.
Yeah.
It's not that important, and it starts to seem idiotic when we think that, when I watch a college basketball game now, and during the last 2 minutes of the game, they are constantly stopping to go and look at the monitors. It sort of brings up the fact that these are still like kids' games that have to be played by adults for a lot of money.
Yeah.
The idea of instant replay exaggerates the importance of sports in a way.
Does it add a level of drama, though?
Well, I guess
an additional level.
It adds a level of drama, I guess, because it draws moments out. And the one exception of this is in basketball. I do like when they check to see if the ball was released in time, at the buzzer. For some reason, that's the exception. But it's not. These aren't life and death scenarios.
Right.
So this idea that 7 guys on a football field do not have the wherewithal to make decisions about something that is just sort of a lucrative pastime, it seems kind of silly to me. And I think it detracts from the idea of what sports are supposed to be about. Yeah.
Well, okay, as a sports guy, let's talk about college sports. Now, I'm a sports guy where I have certain teams, and when they're doing good, I'm a fan. And if they're not, I don't really care because I don't have time. But college sports, I've always thought were kind of stupid and awful and a waste of resources. I've heard all the counter arguments that they give scholarships and they give money to schools and all that. It's all blah 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 blah. Okay, but we're outside. We're basically outsourcing the minor leagues of football and basketball to universities, and that's not what they're for. So I don't know. My question for you is: are you for keeping this antiquated system running, or are you #burn it down?
I prefer college sports to pro sports.
Why?
Well, pro sports are sort of sport. I watch them both, right?
Yes.
I watch college football all Saturday,
and
then I watch pro football Sunday. I'm watching the NBA now. It's not like I'm against pro sports,
right?
But it is hard. People bring up elements of the college game, and they have all these problems. The players aren't making money. And what is more preposterous than the amount of money that's involved with pro sports?
Right.
And the idea of watching, at least college sports are relatively young people playing these games for institutions.
Right.
Okay? It seems very odd that, a guy lives in Boston, so he loves the Patriots. He loves Tom Brady because Tom Brady now pays taxes in his region, I guess, pro sports is about liking laundry.
Right.
I love the Dallas Cowboys when I was a little kid. They're my favorite team.
Yeah.
Okay. Part of me still follows them, right? But not only are the players different and the coaching staff different, the ownership is different, even the stadium is different.
Right.
Nothing has changed except they've kept the same colors and stayed in the same rough geographic region.
Right.
That seems preposterous to me. At least college sports, the idea is that when you watch, say Wake Forest is playing North Carolina State, that there is a kind of person who goes to Wake Forest and a kind of person who goes to North Carolina State. Of course there are exceptions, but in a sense, what they are representing the kind of person who goes to this school. I find that much more meaningful.
Right.
And I also just think the games are more entertaining because, you watch an NFL game, those guys have nothing else to do but think about playing football. Like the quarterbacks in the NFL, of course, are brilliant, but they should be. That is their job. At the collegiate level, it's somebody who's 19 or 20 years old, who is, even at the most corrupt university, pretending to go to class, has a limited number of hours where they can sort of pursue this. It still seems closer to a game.
Right.
So I would... If someone said you had to abolish college sports or abolish pro sports, I would much rather abolish pro sports.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's just more is that I feel like they corrupt the universities because of their educational facilities. And I feel like the future is based on
the pro teams corrupt the whole culture. They corrupt the idea that your community needs to
they sell
for
beer.
A stadium.
They sell beer to minors.
Well, and it's and I'm not against the idea of taxpayer support stadiums. I understand how that has a value to the community. That's complicated, but it's there. I mean, okay, is it insane that Nick Saban probably makes, I don't even know, 3 times as much as any other professor at Alabama? Is it insane? Well, I suppose it is. His value to the university is at least 3 times higher. His value to the educational component of the university is 3 times less. It's a complicated deal.
It is. Yeah. Facebook, you have a question.
In Eating the Dinosaur, you say that all technology has a positive short-term effect and a negative long-term effect. Do you think that there is now even a negative short-term effect?
That's an interesting way of posing it, because, okay, Twitter has existed since when? 2008?
2006.
2006. Yeah. Okay, I feel like 2008 is when it became.
It certainly exploded then. Yeah.
So we're looking at 11 years.
Yeah.
I think it would be pretty difficult to have a discussion about Twitter, or about Facebook, or about Instagram, or any of these things without bringing up the negative components that they sort of offer, or sort of necessitate just because of the way they are. Now, is that a short-term effect or a long-term effect? The short-term benefit was just that we could never do this before, right? We could never have somebody who had no access to anyone suddenly be in a position where if they said something or wrote something interesting enough, it could have the same impact as Tom Brokaw or whatever. I would say, though, for most people heavily involved with Twitter, they either realize it's bad for their lives or they're deluding themselves, and they, and I think that the impact is more negative than positive. So, is it a short-term impact or is it a long-term? I guess we were really kind of arguing over what constitutes short and long.
Let's also talk maybe about what we were talking about before about all the different ways to consume media. This is kind of a digital democratization. Now, I think this has necessarily or just absolutely been a negative thing when it comes to news. We are living in different worlds, from a Fox News viewer to someone who watches MSNBC. They're watching coverage of 2 different countries. But do you think that we could ever go back to having these common experience? Maybe sports, actually, that's positive. Maybe that's something that everyone can get together and watch, but no one's really watching the same TV shows and or listening to the same music. Do you feel that we could ever come back to having a common
two
culture?
things about that. First is it's just the key to this is the use of the phrase digital democratization.
Yeah.
Because we have been socialized to believe that if you put democracy with something else, it's immediately good.
Yeah.
I mean, but if I was hey, let's democratize uranium.
Right.
Let's make sure everybody has weapons grade. Democracy. That would not be so great.
Yeah.
The universal experience thing, there is something like that has come out of social media, which is death.
Right.
Now when Prince dies or David Bowie dies or when anyone, there is this shared situation where not only is everyone experiencing something in real time, I just remember when Twitter and Facebook were new, people who hated it would say I don't want to hear about someone eating a sandwich. I don't want to hear him. Well, nobody can say that if you're mourning the death of someone. So it gives people the ability to essentially emote and very often bring attention to themselves and their own experience, but it can't be questioned. Social media has also really changed award shows. Award shows have a much greater meaning. When I was a music critic, and it was I wasn't gonna fucking watch the Grammys. Who would watch the Grammys? I couldn't believe anyone would do that. Or watch the Emmys, care about the Emmys, see Frasier win. It's who? It's but now it's totally different.
Yeah.
Now those shows are a little better. It seems like they're a little closer to actually what most people are thinking about which of these things have value.
Yeah.
But also this thing where it's it's a live event that we're all happening. It's all happening to everyone at the same time. So this, we miss that. People used to complain. I always use this example. I probably used it 100 times. But I'm going to use it again. I remember watching an episode of Alice, okay, in the 70s, and they're all the girls and Mel, the chef. This is something that makes no sense to you, but if it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. It's they're all staying in a hotel, and Vera, this character, she can't fall asleep without watching the Johnny Carson show. So Mel, the chef, does an impersonation of Johnny Carson for her to put her to sleep. Now, Alice was on CBS. Tonight's Show was on NBC. this was at a period where the Tonight Show was so universal to watching television late at night that even a competing network would concede that anybody watching television at night must be watching this other network. That's how universal the Tonight Show was. That kind of thing is over. Most people would say, like, well, that's good. Like, I want to have I want culture to proliferate. I want to be able to choose, and most of the time it is. But there's part of us that still longs for these shared things. And we got to find them. So we find them through sports, through the deaths of celebrities, through award shows. It has heightened American interest in politics, partially because the kind of person who runs for political office now is so dramatically different than it used to be. Yeah. But even before Trump, even just the idea, like Obama's administration. I mean, part of the thing that Obama struggled with is that in 2008. There were people who were into Obama who had never thought about politics ever. Okay, so then as soon as he was elected, they were like, "This is boring."
Yeah.
And then there's this period where it's like, why doesn't anyone support Obama anymore? It's because they were supporting the idea of this guy. They didn't want to think about policy, But this has changed things a lot, and you see people now who regularly tweet or go on Facebook about politics who you think to yourself, it's like, I know this person. If other people knew this person, they couldn't believe that this person would be talking about Syria or whatever. Like, this person knows nothing,
Facebook, you have a question.
What are some of your favorite podcasts?
Well, I have a very strange podcast diet. This is kind of going to be sort of embarrassing because it's like you're supposed to be like a person in my job, supposed to have this, like, I don't know, everything, the best taste and everything. Well, okay. So I listened to the Bill Simmons podcast because that was like one of the first ones, and I've been on it and stuff, and I know him. I listened to Eddie Trunk's podcast because he interviews lots of metal guys and classic rock guys. And
were you ever on that show, that metal show?
No, I never was.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast called Three Sides of the Coin, which is just three guys talking about Kiss.
Okay.
I listen to a lot of conspiracy-themed podcasts. In fact, sometimes I go into iTunes and I just put in conspiracy and I just I listen to conspiracies while I'm at the gym. Any of my friends have a podcast, I listen to those ones, but I feel like it's just because I miss my friends, like people from The Ringer and people from MTV and stuff. It's like I know who they are, so I listen to their podcast. Not that they're not good, but I'm just saying I'm partially motivated by that relationship. What else? I listened to like S-Town. That was great. I thought it was far superior to Serial, honestly. The reporting I thought was just way better. And I guess that's about it. Well, then of course, but it's not about it because I play a lot of fantasy football and fantasy basketball. So I listen to podcasts that I feel will have some utility for the draft. So.
As someone who cares about journalism, and now this is related to the digital democratization we're talking about, is that there's actually a lot of great writing out there. It's almost a golden age of writing because there's so much of it, but it's harder to make money off of it, so the economics is broken down. I don't know, do you think journalism can have a place? Do you think it can be saved? Economically, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's strange. There's never been a time where it's easier to get a job writing, but never been a time where it's hard to make money doing it.
Right.
So the question becomes, eventually, will a lot of talented people be moved away from this? I mean, when I started at newspapers in 1994, we already talked about how it was like there was no money in this. Like my starting salary, I started a newspaper in Fargo. My first full-time salary was $18,000. And I could live off that, but you weren't going into it for money.
Right.
I don't think many people go into journalism for the money. It'd be crazy to do so. I think what has changed more than the economics, the economics is probably the biggest thing, but the second biggest thing is that there's now a belief that people have sort of given up on the idea of objectivity in journalism. That they've just decided that, no one's a robot, so let's just give up on it. What people want is things that sort of support their biases. So what you see a lot more of now is people going into journalism who are really more into advocacy, social justice, or trying to move the meter back to the right, all of these things. So it is a kind of journalism. It is a kind of journalism that is openly unobjective. But the real problematic thing is that time has proven that people don't want objective news. They just don't. You saw this when Fox emerged, when Fox TV emerged, and it was people's like, finally we have this. So then MSNBC came in and it was like, oh, now you can have this too. And CNN was in the middle trying to sort of be like, we're trying to stay down the middle, but nobody cared. It was like people don't want that.
Right.
Like they actually want to have news that gives them the ability to elucidate what they already feel. That doesn't seem like news to me, but that's life. Yeah.
Just have a few other questions to wrap up with. If you have any questions, so go for it. Okay, as an insider who was there, why did Grantland shut down?
Well, that all had to do with Simmons leaving.
Yeah.
And Simmons getting fired, which happened for a lot of reasons. Partially because of the things that he said about Roger Goodell. I think partially also because I think that they felt that maybe they had lost control of him. And you build a site around a personality that even then they added many great writers to Grantland, but Bill had a say in all of that, so they were all sort of extensions of his ideology. You remove that central piece, well, then it sort of seems like a bunch of people doing fake versions of what existed before, even though they're doing the same work.
Yeah.
It could have kept going. I mean, they could, like, if ESPN would have wanted it to keep going, it could have. But I think they just decided that, we're not going to do this. Yeah.
You're originally from rural North Dakota, and then you now live in the largest city in the country. So as someone who's kind of like came from a rural background but now lives in Brooklyn, there's a lot of animosity between rural and urban America. Do you think, at least in my lifetime, it's the worst that's ever existed. Do you think that bridge can ever be bridged?
No. I mean, no. When I was growing up, I always thought the difference between North Dakota and New York, or Nebraska and LA, or all these things, I had kind of thought they were exaggerated by the way the media was presented. Now I realize that the chasm is actually greater. That the difference between North Dakota and New York is actually far greater than New York and London.
Fargo greater? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
America is a big place. It is, though. It's like a big place, and it's a very, to try to think of the relationship that someone in Boston has with someone in Alabama and that person with Idaho, just from pure geography. I mean, that's, the founding of the country was these 13 colonies. They were all relatively in a line, and there seemed like a huge difference between being in the northern part of the country and being in Georgia or whatever, and yet, in so many ways, the way they were experiencing life, day-to-day life, was very similar. And now that's just not the case. So I can't see, the only way, it would have to be some kind of...
calamity.
Well, that's one option. I was going to say more positively, like some kind of transcendent political candidate who comes from the Midwest and is embraced by the East, and yet he or she seems to almost push against that embrace and still identify as being from the middle of the country. But hard to, and Obama's from Chicago, okay? Yeah. So some people will say, like, well, that's what you're describing, and it was like, but no, he always seemed like a sort of a, part of the intellectual world. It's like, it would have to be a real populist figure, but not a populist figure like the one who was elected president.
Right.
It'd have to be a different kind of figure. Yeah.
All right, Klosterman 2020. What is the best Metallica album?
I would say that I used to always say it was Ride the Lightning, but as I have gotten older,
Wiser.
I really think it is Master of Puppets, which is the conventional answer, but I do think that is them playing their best. I also think that side one of that record, like Battery into Master of Puppets, that's sort of what they do better than anyone else, and they're doing it at the apex level. I like a lot of the songs on Ride the Lightning a little bit more, like like Trapped Under Ice and some of those songs, but I do think Master of Puppets is better.
Where would you rank Injustice for All? That's my entry to Metallica, so I kind of have a nostalgia for it.
Yeah, that was the first Metallica album I actually owned. I'd listened to Master of Puppets, but that was, people always complain there's no bass playing on it because they took all the bass off it.
And it works.
Well, I never thought of that until I heard that, though. Songs are longer, and they were already pretty long. You know, I think that probably the reputation of that album has improved over time. I think people, because now, you know, as time moves for any band, anything that they did during their early period, and now I think you would probably say that Injustice for All is the end of their early period. So all of those records are kind of lumped in as great.
Facebook, you have a question.
Do you like the band Fish?
You know, not really. People often say I look like a guitar player, and I kind of do. I don't really like jam bands in general. Like even like the Grateful Dead, like I prefer the record American Beauty than the live recordings, you know. So I was never a Fish head. I mean, in retrospect, if I had gotten into them, I'm sure I would have liked them because everybody who liked them did drugs. And that would have been great. But I wasn't part of that world. You know?
How important are drugs and alcohol to your craft?
Not at all.
Not at all? Okay. Name a band or performer who society says you're supposed to love, but you just don't get. Everyone has one.
Lots of people. Like society, you know.
Or like, okay, let's maybe narrow it down to like the music hipsters.
Well, see, I would say there's some artists who, you know, I like. Joni Mitchell, Elvis Costello are people who I know are great, but I don't like their music at all. What, like a hip thing that you're supposed to like?
In the canon of great music. Like, I don't like U2, and I'm not alone in that.
I find a lot of, I mean, it's strange because, you know, I'm 45 now, and if music that is consciously geared toward young people applies to me, or appeals to me, it was kind of a mistake by the artist. I mean, it's true. It's like if I, like, so, you know, if, like, I mentioned Chance the Rapper earlier, like, if I was listening to that music, or I was listening to Kendrick Lamar, and I was like, boy, I totally identify with this, well, that really wouldn't make much sense. You know, it's like, it would mean that music is so universally powerful that somebody with no relationship to the individual can tap into it. And outside of the Beatles, that just doesn't happen in music, you know. I'm trying to think of things on like television, for example, that I just, although my tastes in television are pretty conventional, things the critics like, I tend to like. I don't know. That's a hard thing to answer.
Like the one I always found interesting is that Rick Rubin apparently does not get Jimi Hendrix, which I always thought was just a fascinating thing.
Well, you know, there was Robert Christgau when he wrote about Jimi Hendrix early in his career, called him an electric Uncle Tom. He was just sort of like, this is a, you know. So there was, it's bizarre to think that someone like Jimi Hendrix, that there was ever a period where he was like polarizing, that doesn't exist now. That person doesn't exist. Who's like, Jimi Hendrix is over it, and it doesn't really
Except
happen.
for Rick Rubin.
Well, Rick, it's interesting that Rick, because like
it just stood out to me in a profile in Rolling Stone. I just never forgot it. So just to wrap up, so we do a lightning round where it's the same 10 questions we ask all our guests. These are mostly short answers. If you want to say more, the floor is yours. Do you use Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Do you use Android or iOS?
I don't know.
Do you use iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay, you're iOS.
Okay.
All right. Have you recently come across any piece of technology that made you think, wow, I'm living in the future?
You know what my wife just got yesterday? She got the Alexa thing.
It's great.
Okay.
Yeah, Echo.
Well, okay, but I have one question. What if your fucking daughter's name Alexa?
Then you're screwed. You can change the name.
To what?
Is your daughter?
But I mean, it'd be like, because then you'd be constantly saying to your computer, it's like, Alexa, don't climb that chair and it'd be like, what?
Her life is gonna suck for the foreseeable future until the Alexa goes away. But you can't have other call names like computer. You can call it Echo, or you can call it Amazon, I think too. But
why Alexa's the only name? Like, you can't say like I want it to be Bert.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sure that will happen soon. But
that doesn't really make me think I'm living in the future because I just hear her saying like, Alexa, what is the weather like?
Yeah.
Alexa, what is the weather like outside? Alexa, what is the weather like? She's like, it doesn't seem that futuristic to me. Most futuristic thing, well, I mean, now it doesn't because it's in the past, but Shazam, I remember being
was
like
super cool. Yeah.
Well, and nothing will ever make the future seem as crazy as two things. One was YouTube, and I remember the day YouTube. The first time I saw it was like a friend of mine was over at my house, and he's like, "Look at this." He's like, he was a whole group of us. He's like, "Name a band," and like someone said the Replacements, and he put it in there, and it all came up. That was unbelievable. Yeah. But it was the internet itself in the early ~90s. Yeah. I was working at my college newspaper, and my editor was already into all this stuff, and the managing editor. My editor was like, you can look at pornography immediately. And and the managing editor was like what? You can just like type in, like lesbians or something and it will come up. And he's like, yeah, it'll come up in a second. And we all thought that when he said a second, the way you are like, I just gotta wash my hair and I'll be bound in a second. We didn't literally, it was like a second, it actually happened in a second. That was like a dial-up connection. That was crazy. That did not make sense.
It was a magical age, still is. Where do you get your daily news and information from?
Mostly from Twitter and looking at the New York Times.
The thing you hate so much.
Yeah, well, it's intertwined with my life in a way that I can't escape from it. Times and the Washington Post too. But you know what? It's like now, everybody acts like they're kind of like a newspaper. Like you can't get away from news. It's like you walk down the street and someone says like, "Oh, did you hear this?" And it's like, "When did this start happening?" Everyone knows everything.
Ed Snowden, traitor or hero?
Well, I'm not a traitor. On balance, if you gotta pick one of those two, I guess hero, but just barely. 51% on the hero side. I mean, it's like you watch Citizen4. You can't really watch Citizen4 and not come away with the idea that like this person is highly ethical and he's very intelligent and he's not doing this for any reason outside of what his own integrity is. But now, here's what the weirdest thing to me was. Did you see the movie Snowden?
No. I heard it was terrible.
Well, okay, the Oliver Stone movie Snowden, okay? Yeah. So at the end of the movie, Edward Stone's actually in it. Yeah. Okay. And he's acting.
Yeah.
Like it's not just like, I'm Edward Snowden and I approve this message. Like he's at a computer and he's acting and he so it's like, that was weird to me. Somehow that was real troubling to me. Yeah. That he would see this movie that was kind of a hagiography of his life, and I understand him being happy about it, but then acting, he shouldn't be acting.
Right.
Yeah.
Too much of an endorsement.
Yeah, so it went from like 53 to 51 on this.
Okay. Will the singularity occur in 2054?
Not in 2054.
Okay.
Yeah. But we're hoping for it, right?
I am.
Yeah,
I mean, that means basically if you make it there, you get to live forever.
Yeah, I know. I know, and that's So it will be good, right? Or will that?
Well, if you want to live forever, yes. The downside is you might be enslaved in virtual reality forever. It matters how it pans out.
But would it be like, okay, here's what I want to know.
And you can't.
So if you're in the singularity, you feel. Will you be able to? Will it feel like this?
Maybe.
And will you be able to be like, I want to live in like a room full of pillows, and that's what it will feel like to your projected self?
In theory, it could happen that way, but you may or may not have control over it. A lot of variables. I'm team singularity, personally. Yeah.
I'm a little nervous, but I guess it happens.
All right. Is intelligent life out there in the universe?
Well, mathematically, it's got to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the thing about infinity. Everything that could happen will happen.
Yeah.
Like there's a planet that's exactly like Earth somewhere, except I'm drinking Old Milwaukee. Everything else is the same. Yeah. It's got to be. Mathematically, that has to be the case.
Yeah.
So it would be, if this is the only place where life exists.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Doesn't sound right.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. I think it's a big, to me that would be, that would prove God exists, right? Because if it would be so insane for that to happen in one spot.
Right.
You know?
Or to prove that we are God.
Not me.
Not you.
Okay.
Is Bigfoot out there?
Well, you know, I've spent a lot of time with cryptozoologists as a journalist.
Yes.
I'm very interested in the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and stuff like that. No, you know, it's like it's the Loch Ness Monster is the least plausible, right? Because we have one spot. Okay, we can't find him there. He would have to, and also have to live forever and all these things. The Yeti, if you put him out in the Himalayas, you know, it is possible that there could be places that we have not spent enough time existing that some unknown creature could exist. But like Sasquatch is always like in Northern California and like outside of Eugene, Oregon. So it doesn't seem like it's that remote, you know? It's like somebody would have come across it. Somebody would have shot one. I mean, you know, it's like, that's what I really think. It's like if there was even a 1% chance the Sasquatch existed, some motherfucker would shoot it. You find it. Because those guys, it's sort of like how in sports, you know, we always are guessing over who will win this game, and you watch the people on Fox and CBS or something. It's like the people in Vegas, though, where it really matters, they'll be like, it'll be the early season college football game, and they'll be like, Clemson is a 39.5 point favorite. And I'll be like, how do you make that? And they'll win by 40 points. It's like they're so close. If there was actually a Sasquatch to kill, someone would kill it.
Right.
I'm very sure of it.
Yes. What is your go-to drink at the bar?
The go-to drink at the bar. I mostly drink beer now. Because I drink everything kind of the same speed. So I used to, you know, if I drink whiskey, I'm going to drink it as fast as I drink beer. And I'm an old person now. I can't, you know. So I used to drink brandy and ginger ale. I used to drink Jack and Ginger for a while, but now I mostly just drink beer.
Do you have a favorite brand?
I like IPAs because they have a higher alcohol content.
We're in the golden age of television. What are you watching these days?
Well, I'm watching Better Call Saul. I'm watching Fargo. I'm watching Survivor, and then I watch sports. But I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1year-old. So I get up at
Nick Jr.
Well, PJ Mask.
We
Line Guard.
Yep.
Like, you know, the Octonauts. The Octonauts are the best.
I like the Octonauts. I got 3-year-old at home.
Hey man, I have a friend who is a marine biologist, and he learns things from the Octonauts. You know, so I watch a lot of that, and then I watch sports still, and but you know when you. Oh, and I watch Silicon Valley, and I watch Veep, and I just watched Masters of None again. So I guess I am watching Catastrophe. I just watched. I think I have all the answers that anybody who knows who I am would assume I would watch. I think. I think. I don't think there's anything out there that's too crazy.
Gotcha. Okay, well, that was that's it. That's all the questions we got. So we have the book out. It's out now.
Yep.
Anything else that people should look out for? Follow you on
Falling
Twitter.
Rocks,
Falling Rocks, definitely.
Yeah.
So give us a like, give us a share if this is the first time you're watching it. Also check out some of our past interviews. We've done a lot of these. Convo is an audio podcast. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on all the places. Go check them out. And also subscribe and give us a like, give us a review. We appreciate those. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to Chuck Klosterman.
Thanks for having me.
I've been saying Klosterman for many years, but it is Klosterman. And as always, be good to each other. Peace.